this is X1B, but there's also such a thing as Y1B, which is the opposing region of the same channel. Infrastructure-wise, so this would be more so for you, Joe, it's US East 1. So all the AWS infrastructure is in US East 1 for this X side, and the Y side is in US West 2.
So none of the Amagi PlayOUT is on-prem, it's all on AWS?
Yep.
Okay, gotcha, making sure.
Oh man, do I not have access to this?
There's a lot of deployments.
Yeah.
And each one of them is individual. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so this is how the UI looks.
Mm-hmm.
So we have all these channels on the left side, and then you have this PlayOUT tab. This is where the operations folks live. They'll have like a playlist over here that they're watching progress through each segment, and then they can choose to take next. I think they moved it at the bottom here. In one of the releases, they fixed it. They wanted this backup tab, but they could manually take next, which will go into the next segment or the next element, which could be a break. Here is the playlist tab. So when they submit a playlist, they can do it through two ways. They can send a playlist from the traffic system, which is upstream, or they could create a playlist manually here within Amagi itself. The SREs also live in this box. If operation ever flags out an issue, we come in here, we check out the schedule, make sure it aligns with what should be normal, or does the schedule, if operations is flagging some weird scenario happened, we're going to try to check if the schedule matches that weird scenario, just to rule out the fact that, hey, you scheduled it that way, so that's why it happened that way, which is common actually. You could always go back in time to pull up a schedule from like way back in another broadcast date. Majority of the Amagi cores are in Eastern time. The broadcast date. This one looks like it's central. Oh, okay. So Amagi Core 1 is a unique one though, because this is going to change per channel. Some of these channels are going to be central. Some of these are going to be Eastern, just like that.
Yeah, that's crazy how many channels they have on the core.
Yeah.
Wow.
And this Core 1 is DC, so to Dry Creek folks. If we go to Core 2B, this is the Anglewood Cliffs folks. And this is where they have CNBC, Gulf, MSNBC. So yeah, over here, if you look at this, this is what operations is probably looking at on their pod. They're watching this live segment progress. And then this is going to be a ad. If I go into the schedule view, I stay away from the PlayOUT tab because I don't want to click anything and jack something up. I stick to the schedule tab. If I want to do any investigation, I stick to this. You can pull up the live, so these are the shows. This is show 1, 2, 3. You can expand on the show. You can see any breaks that are probably there. So this one has breaks. What does it have in each break? These are the media files, the break media files. You'll be hearing them refer to these as spots. So these are the live show, live segment, or if it's a file base, they just call it segment. And then anything within a break, they're called spots. So break 1, spot 1, break 1, spot 2, spot 3, 4, 5. You can play it over here as well and just check out what that ad is. And then you can check the status of those to to see if these medias got downloaded to the player. This channel 201 player, did it download this media or not? Let's see if we go down here. So you see this right here, missing in cloud. It's telling me that this media called not present is missing in cloud. Not present doesn't exist, so that's why it's missing in cloud. This is something the traffic team is pushing that they shouldn't be pushing.
Are we supposed to go through this to audit, or the traffic will handle that, or spot ops?
Yeah, this core is in shadow right now. It's not on air, so this might be deliberate. It hasn't been flagged to us, so they might know that they're doing this. They might be aware that this is happening, so they'll take care of it themselves. But if operation comes to us and says, "Hey, we're seeing this not present come up where a program segment file should be," then yeah, we'll investigate it. Why is that happening? And that's probably going to be because they're sending a file in the playlist in a format that Amagi's not able to parse, so it defaults to this not present, which is probably what's happening right now. They're sending a placeholder that Amagi doesn't recognize the syntax of, so it just puts it as not present. But yeah, so any given core, you have a X and Y side, and that's redundancy. So you'll have the same content playing on the X side. This is golf. Channel 201 is golf. So on the playout of channel 201, this top box is the player output. You'll have the X side playing this content, and you'll have the Y side playing the same content at the same time. Now, if something happens to one side, you still have the opposing side playing that same content, and downstream of the players, operation has a control of switching accordingly. I'll explain that part next. So 201 X side is playing this content over here, Y side, same exact content. The bottom over here is the ingest point, so these are the live sources. This is a live source that's being used for this live segment, which then we're getting the output of from the live player. And then this is what operation uses to do the switching. I have a conceptual that'll help visualize this a little bit better. But essentially, this is what operation uses to do the switching. So for the X side, they currently have the switcher sending out the feed of its own player. So the switcher here has its own player's content going out. And it doesn't look like any of the switchers are on the opposing side. Oh, actually, it's a good example right here. So the Y side of channel 232, which is, this should be Y for its own player, but it has the X side player's content going out. Now let me explain. This might be a little bit confusing, but let me explain through a lucid chart. This will help make it more sense. So, live sources on premise over here on the left side of my screen. The live sources go up into the cloud through direct connect circuits, and they're spun up in Amagi as in relay pods, which are called ELIC relays, which are EC2s. That live source is then fed into a player. Ignore everything else around here, just focus on the player part. The player sends its feed into the switcher. A switcher has 4 inputs. Stop me at any time if I'm too fast.
Can you go back a little bit to the inputs of the switcher? So like you're taking
inputs of the switcher.
Yeah. Alright.
Yep.
So not just a little bit more. Break-in. Okay, sorry. I was trying to see. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna explain this part now. So again, USD East 1, this is the X side. So the X side 201 player is here in US East 1. The Y side 201 player is over here on the US West 2 side. So US West 2, US East 1, X, Y. Now the switcher on the X side has 4 inputs. Input 1 is always going to be its native player's feed. So on the X side, X switcher for channel 201, input 1 is always its own player. On the Y side, Y switcher 201, its input 1 is always the Y side's player. But built into the switcher is also this whole concept of cross-region redundancy. So you have the opposing side's player output coming into the switcher in input 2. So what if something happens to the player over here in X? You still have the same content coming into the switcher from the opposing side. So you can automatically fail over to that and have that go out for distribution. Because otherwise that'd be a single point of failure. Player goes down, everything on the X side goes down. Okay, now input 3 is a delay server. Not every core has a delay server. Delay server, some people call it a delay server, some people call it rehearsal. It's the same thing. All it is you're playing content 2 hours in advance just to do a sanity check that the content that you're gonna go live with is okay. Like there's no issues, there's no bugs. And obviously this is for file-based PlayOUT. This is not for live. And then you have input 4 of a switcher, which is break-in. So break-in is basically emergency feed. So this ingest point that you're sending into the player that then gets fed into input 1, what if that whole pipeline goes down? It could be an issue on the ingest point, it could be a problem with the player. What if that just goes down? Well, you have this break-in in place, this emergency failover. Also the cross-region. What if cross-region is also down? Then you have this break-in place. Okay, input 1 and 2 are no-go. You have no option. You have this emergency content. Depending on the core, you could have your break-in be the same source as your ingest point. So they might have the same thing here. So if input 1 goes down, they'll just quickly go into break-in. The downside about break-in, you don't get as runs. As runs are generated within the player to prove that you played content, which then you could send to ad sales and make revenue off of.
How do you guys reconcile like what gets played out on the ad side and what schedule and you send to your
Yeah, that has nothing to do with us. That's all scheduling team. They already schedule out what ads get put where and how long they play for and everything. So we have no control over that.
So do they pull like PlayOUT logs instead of the ads run logs? Okay.
Well, yeah. So if you're talking about how do ads run data get generated, that's within the player. So the player generates the PlayOUT logs per as run. Well, it sure generates the as run report based off the PlayOUT logs, and each file or media or whatever you call it in in this case a file-based content, has a unique identifier, which it uses to log when it started playing, what it's playing, and when it completed playing, to then generate an ASM report off of that and deliver that to the ad sales team.
So the Amagi player is better like to take an EP2 in that region that specifically does the player service?
Yeah. Yeah, the player itself is generating the logs and it's sending it to its, because there's a whole Kubernetes environment, right? So there's like background workers that actually do the generating of report and delivery of report.
Got it. Yeah.
The player is just generating the logs and it's feeding it to a service that's gonna then, it's gonna look for the started, playing, completed for each ad. Once it gets it completed, it goes like, okay, I have everything I need. Let me go process this. In the processing, it generates the ASM report, then it queues it for delivery, and then we deliver it to. There's a whole team that deals with that, the NITSI team. So then we deliver them the ASM data, and then they aggregate it into their system to then have ad sales have access to it. But yeah, what I wanted to focus on this part was like the whole switcher concept.
You know the switcher. Sorry. Do we have to use Amagi if a customer using a different switcher like Sony? Is it workable, or it has to be Amagi cloud switcher?
Yeah, no, it's a cloud switcher. This is a pod.
Oh, okay.
This is a Kubernetes pod.
I see.
Yeah, so switcher, the name switcher is a little misleading. You would think it's like a hardware device.
Yeah.
but it's
So
not.
it's just like a microservice that runs on a pod and a Kubernetes cluster.
Yep.
Right? Okay.
And all it does is it's taking in all these feeds, these NDI feeds, and then you're controlling which one is getting outputted to get delivered to TechX, which then does the distribution part.
How does it translate into a hybrid environment where they have a physical switcher on premise and Amagi do the ingesting or the playback on the cloud? Do you have some type of sample? Or it has to be all 100% cloud?
You're saying if...
He's thinking like, what if Amagi just does like certain portions of it, but goes back to a hardware switcher? Like a master control room, is that what you're talking about with?
Yes, it's like a cloud content that being ingested.
There's probably no way to do that because of latency, I would imagine.
I don't think that exists. So what they do have is they have these spare channels where let's say they're in a live show over here, playing whatever they need to play at that live event. But then they'll have the spare channel, which are identified by this letter Z at the end. So it will be playing some other content which is being recorded. And then when that live show is over, they'll schedule the recorded content to start playing. So let's say you have a live show that started at 1 p.m., but then you also have another event, another live show that you have to also air on the same channel that starts at 1 p.m., but you don't have to deliver to your audience till later in the day.
Got it.
So, but it starts at 1 p.m., so you somehow have to, have that content. So you're recording it here, and it's being stored in a file. And now when this first live event finishes, you're basically building out the schedule to go and pull the recording from the other channel and play back that. There's like an artificial live event scheduled to play back later down in time. I don't know if that's what you're referring to.
I'm referring to the live ingest linear channel that in real time. So if they streaming through the camera IP base or switcher, do they feed into the Amagi so the Amagi can do live to VOD?
Nope. It all has to go. It all has to go on premise to Angled Cliffs, and then it needs to get pulled into Amagi through the direct connect. So there's no direct ground to ground as in camera or
I see. It's file based.
that. Yeah, it has to go through on premise. Then they have the SNP encoders. There's a whole workflow that it has to go through to get into the cloud.
Got it. Are we still using Elemental Live, or we kind of phase out?
On the distribution side, I think. Elemental Live. No, we're not using that here.
What do we use?
It's all Amagi.
Oh man, okay, fully committed.
Yep.
So it's no hybrid or anything, right? So we
No.
This is to be another like trend here. It's all built into a Magi platform.
Yep.
All that functionality that we used to have separate pieces of equipment back in the day.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's basically the whole purpose behind Amagi, that we want to get away from the on-premise hardware workflows and try to do everything cloud-based. So something that's a little bit more dynamic, that you could, master control from anywhere, essentially.
Yeah, this is super cool. Like, I think, I've always thought about how this would work, and what you guys are doing this in production is good.
Yeah, it's very complex and very expensive.
Yeah, expensive, I bet. Like, I can only imagine your Amagi bill.
Oh my goodness.
How did you handle Olympic game? The last time the Olympic game is all delay, not like real time.
You're talking about this past Olympic
Yes.
summer?
Hmm?
Paris?
Yes.
Yeah,
that was
we
out
did live. Yeah, that was
live playout. Yeah, that was live playout.
Uh-huh.
on Peacock.
Yeah.
You go to the Amagi, huh?
That's the beauty of the cloud. Yeah, that's the crazy part.
Amazing.
That's the part that's, I think, hard for you to wrap your brain around, just like me. It's like, and they're able to do all of that live and process all of that, switch everything, and do frame rate playout, all the cloud based now.
So technically, the Amagi can be the DVR on the cloud, and it can share to multiple master control room.
Yeah, it's like all these things are just like pods, like you said, in
Yeah.
Kubernetes. So they're just VMs essentially, right? Like containers, it's microservice running that I got to deploy to.
I see.
And they're scaling up and down constantly.
Oh yeah.
Depending on demand. So
I'm just thinking about like YAML behind all of this. How crazy it's gonna be.
that's the part that I feel like the struggle on the DevOps side is there's a lot crisscross and configuration.
Yeah, so I'm looking at each one of these things that you have on here on the linear side, right? And looking at the function that we would have to program on the config, right? And then like all the different variables associated with each one and the interoperability of each one, right?
Yeah. And some of them rely on the other, so
yeah, exactly.
If you mess up on one, it's gonna directly impact the other.
Oh man, this is
awesome. It might not be straightforward. You might think like, what the hell does this have to do with that? But it does.
Like
that's a learning process.
This is like one of the world's most complex formulas you're messing with.
What does DMG stand for on the right side? DMG, SRT?
Yeah, so the DMG is like the on-premise SRT origins.
Got it.
So all of our live sources that don't go through JPEG access workflows, they live within the DMG, and Amagi basically joins that as a listener.
Got it. And muxing, when you say muxing, what do you do? Muxing the audio or muxing all the auxiliary data?
Where are you seeing
Tech X on the right side, say Core 2, Distributed Mux 4 is, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what on the Tech X side, I don't know what the Mux.
Okay, got it. Okay.
I think that's taking this encoder, like signal, that's the entire signal and muxing it so you can distribute.
Got it. Package it or something like that.
And that comes down to the on-premise side.
Okay.
So you'll hear them say like Amagi Core 8, 9, and 10 are on MUX 4, or it's broken up in a particular manner. But this, again, comes down to the whole distribution side, which out of my world, so I don't know much about. But we do have something like MUX or demuxer within Amagi over here, and that's more so like converting video from one to another. Like for instance, from the X side player to the Y side switcher input 2, how does that happen? So it's an NDI, which then goes through a muxer, which converts the NDI to wrist. So it can go from US East 1 to US West 2. And then there's a demuxer over here, which converts the wrist back to NDI. So the switcher input 2 can take it. So there's a muxer demuxer in that sense. But yeah, this granular information, I think, makes more sense the more you're exposed to it and using in context to something real life. So for Win, it might be a little bit different. Like there's an issue that one of the SREs are troubleshooting that you're shadowing. You have the diagram up, this diagram up, that you're watching alongside shadowing someone, and you're putting the pieces together.
Got it.
For Joe, that might be a little bit different. You're shadowing one of the DevOps people deploy or make a configuration change on something, and you have this diagram up on the side, and you kind of could, mentally place yourself on where they're making the change. If they say they're making a change on the delay servers, okay, well, what the hell is a delay server? What the hell is this? Ortiz address. So yeah, I feel like one thing I would definitely mention is don't try to figure out everything at once.
You're right.
You'll probably overburden yourself and burn yourself out.
True.
That's a good
Overload.
way to go a little crazy.
Yeah. So, be easy on yourself. Trust the process and just, take it day by day. Honestly, no one will judge you at all. If they ask you a question, or if you're in a position where you have to say, I don't know, that is completely fine. Keep in mind that this is something new, and many people that are even touching this are learning as they go. So yeah, don't rush to figure anything out. You're not going to be behind. You're not going to look bad. No one's going to hold it against you. Just take it step by step and let the information come to you the more you're exposed to it. So just the more work you're going to do, you'll gain the experience, you'll gain the exposure, and that's how you'll learn.
Do you have a chance to come and visit on premise at all for MBC Studio? Or
For you guys?
yeah, have you been to the MBC Studio on Ground Zero?
Yeah,
Does it help you a lot?
I've been to 30
Yeah.
Rock and Inglewood Cliffs before. I just have friends from ESPN that have gone over there. And I've had interviews at Inglewood Cliffs before. And I ended up taking other jobs at the time because it was like getting to Jersey from Connecticut is like